Good morning, everybody. Very nice to see everybody this morning on this Plush Peak morning. This is a green tea. By the end of this session, you're going to understand more about green tea in Fujian Province. You're going to understand how come Fujian is such a big producer of green tea. And the theme of today's session is renewal and refreshment. Now, what type of refreshment are we talking about? I could have just left that there and not really pursued this question, but I wanted to say refreshment for two reasons. It's a chance for all of us to review a little bit of the history of tea in China because we're working with green tea where it all started. So refreshment and renewal, the sense of renewal that green tea gives to you when you drink it. So that's the focus of this session. And you'll know a lot more at the end of the session than you did at the beginning. Now, for those of you who just rolled out of bed, got your cameras and your Zoom all set up, I sent you two maps. I've sent maps before, so some of you may have these maps, but I wanted you to have them again because I want to talk about these maps today, particularly the second one. First one is more just to remind you of stuff. So the first one deals with the provinces in China that produce tea. And what it illustrates is that there are about 16 provinces that produce tea. And you see that it goes north, 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 up to about Henan and Shandong. And the northern part of both of those provinces and everything north of that, no tea production. Too cold, growing season isn't correct, soil isn't correct. And then as you go south, you see south, direct south, and then southwest, you see many, many provinces, all the way to the borders of Burma, Laos, and Vietnam. They grow tea. So I wanted to center you on that and then start talking about Fujian Province. So let's locate Fujian Province on the big map. On the big map, find Taiwan, and then look to what would be the west and a little bit south, and that's Fujian, F-U-J-I-A-N. And I gave you a detailed map of Fujian, which is the second attachment. Why did I do that? Because there's some amazing things about Fujian Province, and I'm going to refer to them right now. So get that map up. So we all know from past experience that Fujian Province has several or produces several different types of tea. So what is it famous for? Let me think here. Oh, famous for white tea. And in China, the biggest white tea production in China is in Fujian Province. So you remember I talked about Zhenghe and Fuding and Jianyang. Those places are all on the map. But don't worry about that. We're not really trying to find those today. But what else does Fujian produce? It produces cliff teas. So cliff teas, and by the way, does anywhere else in the world produce cliff teas? The answer is no. If anywhere else advertises producing cliff teas, everybody's got a problem. The tea proprietor has a problem, the packaging has a problem, and you as the customer would have a problem with them advertising falsely that they have cliff teas. Cliff teas only occur in the Wui Mountains. Now, to get you centered, remember the Wui Mountains are at the far north, right on the border with Jiangxi Province, and it's north and west, and you'll see Wuyi Mountains, W-U-Y-I, and then it says Shan, it doesn't say mountains, S-H-A-N. Then as you go further south, there's another oolong that's produced in Fujian Province. And those are the iron goddesses. So if you find Anshi, Anshi's a lot harder to find. But if you go further south in Fujian, it's easy to find Quanzhou, Q-U-A-N-Z-H-O-U. So Anshi is close to that. And again, don't worry if you can't find exactly where it is. That's not what we're going to talk about today. So Fujian Province is the leading producer of oolong tea in the world. So it produces white tea, it produces oolong tea, light, cliff teas. Now, does Fujian produce any other type of tea? Well, as it turns out, it's been famous through the years for producing red tea. And while the volume of red tea today is much less than it was in the late 1700s, early 1800s, because by the end of the 1800s, the tea had shifted, the production of that tea had shifted really from Fujian to Anhui. So Anhui was producing a lot, Fujian was producing less. Does that mean that farmers stopped growing tea? No. Instead, all it means is they stop producing, or they produce less of the red tea. Some of them transferred their production skills to green tea. So we have Fujian producing those three teas, and very famously, because smoky pine, which is a red tea, which is really one of the starting points of red tea overall in terms of propagating that methodology, began in the Wuyi Mountains. It began in Fujian Province. So Fujian Province, we all know these three types of teas there. Now, in China, they have a saying, and the saying is as follows. If you have drunk 2 Fujian green teas, you are, and you can fill in the blank, lucky, it's unusual, it's astounding. They finish it up in many different ways. Why is this? It's because most of China has not drunk very much Fujian green tea. Oh, well, maybe the Fujianese are just hiding their green tea and they keep it internal and don't share. Is that what's going on? Let's give you some more context to understand this. So Fujian Province exports, it's the second largest exporter provincially of green tea in China. So this tells you where it's all going. It's going elsewhere. Where's it going? Mostly to Southeast Asia, but a chunk of it is going to Japan. Now we're going to have to discuss the Japan situation separately. Southeast Asia is what they're using that for, by and large, is as a base for blends. Does this mean that Fujian tea is not that good because it's being used for blends? Quite the contrary. Fujian green tea has been grown since, from a record standpoint, since at least 376 AD. And at certain points in the history, during the Tang Dynasty, during the Sung Dynasty, oh, we better get you situated. Tang Dynasty is around 618 to 960, somewhere. If I miss a year or two, don't worry. And then the Sung dynasty follows that. The Ming dynasty, 1368 to, who knows, about let's put it 1644. And then the Qing dynasty, 1644 all the way to 1911 or so. So in all those dynasties, parts of Fujian were producing green tea that was sent to the emperor as tribute tea. Now, remembering this was sent to the emperor, do you take secondary product or off-brand product and send it to an emperor? The answer is no. You send the best you have, and you keep sending so long as the emperor nods his head. Oh, this is good. So let's put this in the context of entire history of tea, because for those of you who are new, and there's several new people today, and that's why we're doing the refresher here, because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Tea started in China as green tea. Green tea refers to a processing modality. What is that processing modality? Well, you pick leaves off of these bushes or trees. Usually for a spring pick, you pick a bud and a leaf or two. Some places pick twice a year. Some places pick 3 times a year, depending on where they are geographically. The best picks are the primary spring picks. And the primary spring picks sometimes can be as early as the end of February. And those are the most expensive, the most pricey on the Chinese market. We have some of those in here. And this year in particular, we focused on those first spring picks to make sure we actually got a lot of green tea this year, which we did. So this process has been going on for well over 2,000 years. So you pick, you bring into the production area, which is in the old days, the farm. When you were making tea, originally, what you were doing was using some form of heat to actually denature the oxidation enzyme. So you were either steaming or you were frying. So I ask you this. We all know that Japan steams their tea to stop that enzyme, to denature that enzyme, and that China today fries, by and large, the tea to denature the enzyme. I'm wondering, was it always like this in China? Answer would be no. The Chinese in the beginning steamed, so the Japanese did not invent this. In fact, in the early years, the Japanese didn't have tea, period. They had no tea plants on Japan. The first recorded history of tea to Japan happened in 772. How did it get there? It got there through Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks from Japan came and studied in China in the Tang Dynasty, 771, 772. They liked this drink. My goodness, when you're meditating, you can stay awake. Wow. Oh, and on top of that, actually it tastes good. So they took back cuttings and they planted those cuttings in and around Kyoto. And then tea industry started in Japan from that time. So obviously, and it's not so obvious except in hindsight, the Japanese monks, when they took it to Japan, followed the principles of processing that existed in China. So you picked, you steamed, and in China, you compressed to make a cake. And after you made the cake, you dried it, and then it went to market. This was how most green tea was produced in China up until the end of the Tang Dynasty, around 960 or so. I'll talk about why that changed, but not yet. So in Japan, what they did was they picked, once they got crops going, they steamed, and then they actually did produce small cakes, and then they ground it up. And they invented something, or so it's said in some places, called matcha. Now, is this truly a Japanese invention? I'm glad that your suspicious and inquiring minds right away were thinking, well, wait a minute, how'd they do that? They did it because that's exactly what the Chinese were doing with the cakes. The Chinese called it mocha. Japanese called it matcha. But that is strictly a Chinese invention. So this leaves you with the question, well, did the Japanese do anything related to tea that's new and exciting? Did they invent anything? And the answer is yes. They did tea ceremony differently than how the Chinese did it. Tea ceremony existed in China, and competing with teas at a high level existed in China. But the Japanese formalized it and later on infused a so-called samurai spirit into the tradition of the tea ceremony. So what does that end up meaning in terms of a difference between the Chinese ceremony and the Japanese tea ceremony? And remember, we're talking generalizations here. So don't be confused. I'm giving you a big picture. It would take me hours, and I actually could do it if forced to do it, to give you a detailed step-by-step differences between the two. So generally speaking, the Japanese formalized the timing, the body movements, the positions on how you sit, the thoughts you're supposed to have in your head. They formalized that all as part of the Japanese tea ceremony. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, very formalized ceremony. Now, obviously, the tea is supposed to taste good, but taste good in Japan tea ceremony is defined differently than in Chinese. Chinese tea ceremony has always been more about, don't talk to me about the positions of how I sit. Don't talk to me about my hand positions, is how I'm doing this tea. Talk to me about the end result. Do you like the tea? Is it better than any other tea you've tasted? Have I handled the water properly? The Chinese later, and so let's define later, probably sometime in the Ming Dynasty, and remembering that the Ming Dynasty started in 1368. So sometime in that period, spent more time, particularly in Fujian Province. Really, Fujian Province in many ways is home of tea ceremony in China. And what that revolved really around was the ceremony related with oolong teas. And so they developed a way to handle small cup. They developed the accessories to do that and the tools to do that. And their tools are different than the Japanese tools. So this is difference and in broad strokes, because like I said, I could do 2 hours on this difference by difference by difference, but I'm trying to give you the general thought. And I'm trying to hurry up because Tea Master's already signaled that she's thirsty. I'm thirsty too. So I think what we're going to do, I think I'm going to ask the Tea Master to go ahead and demonstrate the brewing of this tea, and then she'll brew with you, and then we'll get back to stories. And who knows what sort of story you'll hear today. So it is such a pleasure to bring the numinous thirsty Tea Master to the session.
Thank you so much. Yes. So we do Fujian green tea, huh? So yeah. So this this tea from Fujian area. So we went to it's beautiful, huh? So just talk to everybody. So the Fujian green tea are famous. What they famous? But right now, I sending the three. This is my section, huh? 3 glasses, huh? This is everybody know. This is my style. This is this is called tato. Yeah.
Tea toy.
Yeah. So I like the prefer the quality part. Wait for me. So okay, right now I take the 170.
So all of you already should have prepared 175-degree water. She's going to heat the cups, and you can heat the cups with anything between boiling and 175. But since you're going to use 175 to actually brew, it's probably most convenient for you to use that.
First.
So she pours the water in, heating the cup, making sure that there's no odd soap stain on the cup, because you don't want anything to interfere with the end flavor. And she has 3 cups. When you have 3 cups, you can dissipate the heat faster. Now, today we're working with Fujian green tea. Fujian green tea doesn't need the heat dissipation as much as so many of the other green teas do. And as I explain more about Fujian green tea, particularly Plush P, you will begin to understand why there is a difference in how it's handled. So some things just to mention, some throwaway things just to mention. This green tea, Plush P and Hale and Hardy, both from Fujian Province, are USDA certified organic green teas. They're made in large quantities, and we'll talk about that in a minute because there's some reasons behind that. All right, so she's going to dissipate this steam. And remember, tea making is an accumulation of small techniques. And do you have to do every single technique every day? The answer is no. If you're in a hurry, you can skip a technique or you can abbreviate a technique. But you get the best flavor if you're able to do all of the techniques. Now, you know she didn't dissipate it that much. It doesn't need it. She takes bag number 1, labeled Plush P, and she pours it into the heated cup.
Toy of pomegranate? Somebody wants to know.
No, the question is it a pomegranate, that tea toy? It's actually a lotus plant. So you put the leaves in, you shake, you smell. In order to ease the pouring, she's going to pour direct from a pot. What does it mean, ease the pouring? So that you don't pour directly on the leaves. This is all part and parcel of the technique. You pour directly on the leaves, you have the possibility to scald them. Scalded tea leaves are not good. So this is a bad word that I just said, just in case you're wondering. And you set the timer for 4 minutes. And you make sure that you've heated up the other cup. All right. So we're talking about, we finished the tea ceremonies. We're in Japan. I want to finish the steps of processing, and then we're going to go back to Japan. And for those of you who are used to this smooth, steady, one location, everything is very easy to understand. Remember, I'm doing big history today, and that's why we're jumping around. And we're jumping around because we're going to have to go back to Japan in relationship specifically to Plush Peak and Hale and Hardy that we have in this shop. So you pick, you bring into the farm, you apply heat. These days, it is, you fry in a wok, very hot wok, usually 300 to 400 degrees. You fry until such time as the farmer smells that's enough. So every green tea is different. In this case, they roll afterwards, and they roll for shaping purposes and breaking down the cells a little bit. And then at the end, they bake. You always bake at the end. Almost any style of tea, you apply heat at the end to make sure that the water or the moisture content of the leaf is low. How low does it need to be? It needs to be no more than about 6%. Between 3 and 6% is where you should be. Why? If you're above 6%, after 3 to 4 months, mold will come into the leaves. That's not a good thing. If you are under the 6%, then you can preserve this, particularly if you're careful, for a long time. Long time is relative, especially compared to other teas. So if you refrigerate green tea, you can actually safely store it for a couple years. There's certain conditions. Got to be tightly sealed. You don't want to be going in and out every day, open, close, open, close. So you take about 3 months worth of tea and put it in another sealed container, leave that out, you use that, and then you go back once you've depleted that and fill that up again. And that way, the going back and forth in the refrigerator is limited, 3 to 4 times a year. And the tea stays fresh. Now, did I use the term freezer? The answer is I did not use the term freezer. I said in the refrigerator, so it needs to be at around 41 degrees. If you freeze green tea thinking, oh gosh, cold is good, colder must be better. The answer is absolutely, unequivocally no. What happens if you freeze green tea? Well, when you thaw it, the leaves turn black. And you don't get a red tea taste from black green tea leaves. You get a bad taste. So don't do that. It's in the refrigerator only, not the freezer. So you can, if you're careful, handle this for about 2 years. Timer has gone off. Tea master is going to separate the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Deliberately, not in a hurry. So you're looking at that color because when you do it, it should end up being roughly this color. Beautiful, nice color, beautiful green tea color. And you know what? Most people, when they see green tea in leaves, see this color. They're not used to such a transparent color as you see in other green teas, but this is more reminiscent. This looks like it really has tea in it. Yes.
In the bag, the scent of the leaves evokes a spring meadow. What elevation is the tea farm at? And as an organic farm, do they allow other plants to coexist in rows? Is it a tea meadow?
So great question. So the dry leaves to this commentator smell like it comes from a spring meadow. And so this leads the questioner onto the following thought pattern. And questions. What elevation is this at? This is at around 4,500 feet above sea level. So it's not low, but it's not the highest either. Very beautiful area, huge amount of tea processed in this area. And we'll go back to the reason why in a minute. So that's, yes.
Sorry, what elevation is the tea farm at?
4,500.
4,500.
Yes, okay. So let's go back and smell the leaves, the wet leaves. So it's a characteristic green tea. Okay, I've got that in my head. And now let's enter the quality arena. So this is done at 175 degrees. So we're going to take 175 degree sip. Oh, you know what? I failed to answer part of that last comment. And the commentator asked, and I could sense through the airwaves, the commentator thinking, gosh, that was an incomplete answer. So I picked up your thought, and there are plants between the rows. And this is part, it isn't necessarily because it's USDA grade organic. It's done to promote flavor within the tea leaves. All right, so let's take our 175 degree sip. So there's several things, and remember, when we're in the quality arena, all right, so for those of you who are new, quality arena here, we're trying to get mouthfeel. We don't care about taste initially. We care about mouthfeel. Where is it astringent? What aftertaste are you receiving, if any? And what energetics are you feeling, if any? So let's define energetics again for new people. You have many ways that this is addressed out in other forums. What we're talking about is the physical feeling you get after drinking the tea. And I'll tell you, not everybody is the same. And some people get an obvious feeling, some don't get much feeling at all. So it doesn't matter what your answer is. What matters is you're looking for it. That's really the key element. Chinese medicinal, herbal medicinal thought has certain expressions about drinking green tea. They think that green tea belongs in certain periods during the year. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is why we always reflect on what sort of energetics. I've taken the second sip to verify what I think I'm receiving and also to start the tasting of it. So the first sip is all about the quality arena. The second sip, I'm starting to really appreciate more the link or lack thereof of aroma in the leaves themselves and in the tea liquor and the flavor. And again, for those of you who are new, there's tea rhythm. tea rhythm is the thoughtful approach to understanding the tea. When you are distracted, you frequently leave with a different impression than when you have tea rhythm. And that's why we go through this. All right, I've got my sense about this. Let me have you brew with the tea master. And so you're gonna make sure your water is 175 degrees. You're gonna set your timer for 4 minutes. And again, don't be fooled. Lots of people are fooled because they see, oh, well, wow, this is a less expensive tea. $4 a cup, $5 a cup. That means maybe it's not as good as the other teas. The answer is no. We drove a great deal with this tea and got special consideration for a number of reasons. So this was our ability to interact with the farmers related to this, rather than the idea that this is a lesser tea. This is not a lesser tea. It's a different tea. It's a Fujian tea, a Fujian green, and that's why we're talking about Fujian greens. You're heating up the cup. You're making sure that there are no soap stains that are going to interfere with the end taste result. And you're going to slightly dissipate the steam. What is the use of dissipating the steam? It's pretty simple. It makes sure that the tea is as bright as it can be. If you use undissipated heat, or water, I should say, you tend to run the risk of flattening the flavor. Some teas are particularly sensitive to that. And that's why we always teach dissipate the steam a little bit, and you're going to get the best possible flavor. Remember, in popular literature, what do you see, especially in the West? Oh, green tea is bitter. Oh, God, the doctor said I got to have green tea because I got this issue or that issue. Yuck, it's bitter. Isn't there any way around it? Well, the answer is it's bitter because it's not brewed properly, not at the right temperature, not with the right grammage. Now, you notice she opened bag number 1, Plush Peak labeled, and put the leaves in, smells the leaves to make sure, oh, is this really Plush Peak? And then it's going to pour on the side of the cup. Okay, and then you already set your timers. You're going to start those. And it's a 4-minute steep. All right, so we've gone through the generic process of how to make green tea. And I've given you a little history about making green tea. And I've given you a little bit of separation in terms of understanding what are the main differences between Japanese green tea and Chinese green tea. What I haven't explained yet is why in the world I'm talking about Japanese green tea. I mean, how much Japanese green tea do we carry in this shop? The answer would be 0. But I'm talking about it because this tea, Plush Peak, and Hale and Hardy in particular, are largely exported to Japan. Why? So looking at the history of matcha in Japan, in the 1990s and in the 2000s, it was becoming more and more popular. So you saw in the Western press, oh, if you drink matcha, you'll become instantly healthy, you'll lose weight, your hair will glisten. I mean, you saw matcha cured everything. Was that true? Certainly, in one's imagination, one could believe it's true. However, maybe the facts don't support the hype. Matcha, of course, is a better beverage choice than, say, Coke. Oh, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to say that probably out loud. Well, in other words, one without sugar versus sugar is probably a better health choice. However, as the increase of consumption in the West, and I'm talking about Western increase in matcha, just went up in this way dramatically. In Japan, it was still going up, but not as dramatically. And therefore, there was pressure on the matcha industry to produce and meet the demand. So this is one issue. Second issue was in 2012. A serious accident occurred. And that was a nuclear related accident. Oops. And over all parts of Japan, wind blew, and what blew in certain areas was heavy particles, radioactive particles, by the way. So pre-2012, Xiaomei and I truly had the idea to carry Japanese teas. And we were all set up to go on this exploration when the Chinese warned us that there was this situation relative to radioactive particles throughout Japan. How did they know? Well, they knew because Japanese scientists that they'd been communicating with had said, hey, we got a problem here. And so you have increasing demand, you have a product that's endangered. How did the Japanese react to this? We'll talk about that in a minute. So your timer has gone off.
A participant observes one thing we never talked about is what the tea looks like as we're brewing it. We're brewing this tea in a glass, which allows us to see from the side. And it reminds me of the kelp forest at the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Oh, great comment. So yes, we don't talk enough about how tea looks as it's being brewed. And this particular commentator notes that this looks like the kelp forest in the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's beautiful. And actually there's an aesthetic with all of these teas. And it's wonderful that you commented on it because all of these teas do have their aesthetic. It's not only the aesthetic of the tea leaves themselves, but it's the aesthetic of the color. It's the aesthetic of how the leaves hang within a cup. It's just simply beautiful. Great comment, great catch. And we should spend more time talking about it. Now, I left you, go ahead and do the quality assessment and so forth. And while you're doing the quality assessment, you know, it's like the chapters in the best Chinese ancient novels. They come to the end of the chapter, and just as you're about to get the essence of an answer, they have this line, wait until the next chapter comes. And so that's what I just did. So let's finish up this rising demand, this problem with the crop. They contract, who is the antecedent? The Japanese matcha producers coordinated and bought in large quantity Plush Peak and Hale and Hardy and used that. They ground it, when it went to Japan and used that to supplement the matcha available for the Japanese market. And not just for the Japanese market, all over the world. And so did they strictly use Plush, Peak, and Hale and Hardy, and that's it in the matcha? No. What they did is they took a percentage of Japanese grown green tea, ground that, and then mixed it with Plush, Peak, and Hale and Hardy. Why is this important? What is the difference? And now we're getting into science. And I get to use one word, and I think this is the only relatively large word I'll use during the whole session: chlorophyll. Japanese green tea, because it's shaded during the last part of its growth cycle, has more chlorophyll. So that obviously affects the flavor. And therefore, if you just did Plush, Peak, or Hale and Hardy, you get a different flavor than if you mix it with Japanese green tea. So that's how they dealt with two issues: rising demand in the West and issues at home with the crop. So that's the story behind these two teas. These two teas, and which two teas am I talking about? Plush, Peak, which you have. Some of you have had Hale and Hardy before. Both of them were a response to rising demand in the West for matcha and the Japanese solution for that. Because one of the questions one of you is going to ask me, and I can feel it coming on right now: why didn't the Japanese, if they hadn't had Fukushima, wouldn't they have just increased their home growth, increased the amount of acreage, and just supplied matcha from that? And the answer is no. This was already in the works from about 2005 because the demand was increasing so fast. The Japanese foresaw that they couldn't increase their own home production. Part of the issue in Japan is farmers, and this is a generalized issue in Japan, they're aging. And the pyramid, not the pyramid, the triangle is upside down. And so you got all these aged at the top, and then you got the youngins at the bottom. Are the youngins stepping in and doing farming? And the answer is not at a high enough percentage. So you have an astounding figure today of the number of farms that aren't being farmed. I've heard figures up to 30%. It is a huge number. And there's nothing in the works right now that I perceive which is going to change this trend. I mean, yes, it's nice that people around the world drink matcha, but wait a minute. Is the price that you're getting per pound increasing at a very dramatic level? And the answer is no, particularly now that they're importing this stuff from China. And so the farming in general is in decline. The tea farming is in decline in Japan. And this is an issue. So, yes. Yes. So, thank you. We're supposed to be, instead of rambling, smelling the tea leaves and then entering the quality arena. And remember, we take that sip, coat our tongue.
The wet leaves smelled grassy, like a freshly mowed lawn after rain. The flavor is refreshing, part of today's theme. And light and bright with a drying mouthfeel.
So great comment to start off. Drying mouthfeel, it's grassy, just like a freshly cut or freshly mown lawn. And
Yep, so grassy scent and refreshing flavor.
refreshing flavor. Yep. All of those, that's a great opening comment. That captures the spirit of this. Yes.
Someone else observes a slightly yeasty scent on the wet leaves, but that quickly disappears. And then it's fresh and clear with only a tiny hint of plants as she inhales. It's a juicy broth, the same hint of dryness, but this lingers in the front of her mouth. It's delicate and thirst quenching.
Delicate and thirst quenching is the summary that this commentator made. Started off with a slight yeasty smell, just slight in the beginning, but then as she went into it, juicy, refreshing, drying at the front of the mouth. This is, I particularly like the juicy and refreshing because sometimes people forget that refreshing and juicy can be used with green tea. You notice none of you so far have reported bitter. This is not bitter. Yes.
And this taster also said it's a smooth swallow. It's a swallowing pleasure.
And that follows up. Not bitter, it's a smooth swallow, a real pleasure.
Somebody else is experiencing just a very pleasantly drying mouthfeel.
Pleasantly drying mouthfeel. And you know, I love this because this proves to you that I haven't given you something that's not tea. All tea. And the better it is, the more you're likely to experience a dryness of the mouth. Has that mouth drying. Why is that? It's got polyphenols. Polyphenols cause the drying in the mouth. Yes.
Another taster says, hey, I find myself more than halfway down the cup because there's this taste and I'm trying to grasp it, but I'm having to chase after it.
Oh, and I really love this comment for a couple reasons. So this particular taster is halfway down the cup, and they're fast halfway down the cup because they're chasing something. What are they trying to catch? They're trying to catch the flavor. It is elusive, and one of the ways to tie back to what that flavor might be is to go back and smell the leaves again, because I think I understand what you're chasing.
Someone finds a gentle toastiness to the tea.
There you go. That's what I believe you're chasing. A gentle toastiness, this commentator observes. And absolutely, when you smell these leaves, there is that smell of gentle toastiness. It's subtle, but it's there. And as you taste this, all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, there is a roast to this. And it's good. So this is the type of tea, by the way. Once you get over the fact it's green tea, if you have an aversion to green tea, you suddenly realize this is as good as any other tea that there is. Yeah.
The leaves were so tightly rolled. Is that a long process?
Great question. The leaves are tightly rolled. The question is it a long process? So the reason that I tied all of this together in relationship to Japan and matcha was to tell you that this is a highly mechanized process. So when they roll it, they have a machine that does it. It takes usually somewhere in the range of 30 to 45 minutes for the machine to complete it. But almost everything except the picking is on a highly mechanized basis, because these are very large farms. And again, they are large producers for the Japanese. How did we come to get involved in this? Because we visited the area, we saw these farms, we were interested in the difference between a USDA certified farm versus a non-USDA certified farm. And so we, as we got to know the farmers who were doing this, it's like, oh, would you like some? And it's like, yeah, this is good. Let's have some. Yeah.
Someone else gets this lightly toasted hay with a little malt and a touch of vegetality to it.
Lightly toasted hay with a little malt and a touch of vegetalness to it. And I like this description because what it tells you as you're going down through this cup is there are so many things in tea. Many times, if we're not taking the time, if we're not in tea rhythm, we miss these subtleties. And these are subtleties of taste and aroma that at the end of the day, when you realize they're there, they give you pleasure. And they make you realize, gosh, I either really like this or I don't care for this taste. But I mean, it's really, really clear what you're making an evaluation of.
Somebody else says, this is definitely a green tea I'd enjoy, even though I'm a Cliff tea and red tea lover. I'm trying to identify the energetics. It's challenging at the moment.
Oh, okay. This is a great comment. It comes with a question. So the comment is, this particular commentator usually is a Cliff tea drinker and a red tea drinker, but is enjoying this, but they're having trouble grasping the energetics. So I'll help you with this. From the Chinese medicinal perspective, they think of green tea as cooling. And I actually do feel a coolness. And of course, we keep the shop cold anyway. Well, when I drink tea like this, I actually feel cold, as opposed to if I'm drinking a red tea, suddenly I have a warming in my chest, and usually in my extremities, I have a warming. So the Chinese would say, and these are herbalists, would say, drink green tea when it's hot. It's really great. I mean, when the weather is hot, not obviously when the tea liquor is hot. When the weather is hot, drink green tea because it will give you that cooling feeling. The many Western medical practices say drink green tea in relationship to helping good heart health. Now, I'm not advertising that, I'm just reporting. And again, what I'm really reporting, the reason I went there is because many people who make this recommendation started off with, well, green tea might be a little hard to drink, but this is what you need. No, it is not hard to drink. Not only is it not hard to make, but when made correctly, it actually is a relaxing, easy to drink beverage. And that was the main thing we wanted you to take away from today's Plush Peak, because again, looking at the price on the board, oh, well, this is 1/4 the price of something else, therefore it must be 1/4 the quality. And the answer is no, it is not 1/4 the quality. Remember, the understudy takes shortcuts, but the tea master never takes shortcuts. So if it's on the board, it's had to get through her. And so that means it's a really good tea. Yes.
The idea that this is used for matcha is puzzling, as most of the matcha that I've quaffed has had a much more yeasty or malty flavor. So does the matcha processing add new flavors?
Oh, great question. The questioner says that the flavor of this doesn't match the yeasty maltiness of the flavor of matcha. So the questioner is saying, in essence, where's the disconnect? Is it because of processing on the matcha side? How do we explain that disconnect? And it is because of processing. It's two things. Let me back up without messing this up. First off, I gave you a hint about it before. They would never they would never alone, singly, make this as a matcha and put it on the market. They always put a portion of Japanese tea because, again, you won't get that malty yeastiness, particularly the yeastiness you're referring to, unless you have the Japanese tea in there. And so hence it's really all part of that process in Japan as creating the final product. All right, so today, as promised, we went through and we gave you a Fujian green. And again, for those of you who've had Hale and Hardy, if you met somebody in China, you told them, oh, I've had 2 green Fujian teas, it would be like, oh my gosh, you are really astounding, because lots is produced. So let's put a percentage to that lots, by the way. Fujian produces 8 to 10% of all the green tea that is produced in China. So that gives you some round numbers to work with. But again, almost none of it, or very little of it, hits the Chinese market because they're producing all these other wonderful things that hit the Chinese market. Most of the green tea farms in Fujian tend to be larger, since it's all being, not all of it, but most of it's being exported. So they produce more efficiently. In some cases, there are farms where they don't even hand pick, especially those that they're sending to Southeast Asia, because that's not what they're looking for in Southeast Asia. They're looking for a base to something else. They're looking for a blend. And so that's why you rarely get to experience a Fujian green tea. And that's why we have so few, but we have at least 2, so that all of you can be astounded. All right. The only thing we didn't spend a lot of time was that map of Fujian, but I think you get the idea. The green tea grows mostly in central Fujian Province. It's isolated large farms, large production that, again, for the most part, gets exported. As usual, your commentary today was just terrific. And you guys are so, so good, because you got to the heart of this. And most especially, you got to the heart of how good it is. And that's what we really wanted to leave you with today. So this week, what is your assignment? It's to stay healthy. And next week, what we will do is we'll talk about clouds and mist with you, because that's next week's tea. Looking forward to seeing you next week. You all take care. Bye-bye now.